So I recently had a debate with the renowned Catholic apologist Trent on the well-known Catholic YouTube channel Pints with Aquinas. I decided to make this video as a sample of my arguments in that debate and hope you will go to the full debate in the video description to get more of Trent's arguments and to judge for yourself who had the stronger position.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you to Matt and Trent for both of you guys for making this debate happen. It's an honor to be here. Now, for most people, the Book of Mormon is kind of a joke. It's a laughable work of religious fiction. But isn't that what many people say about the Bible? Trent today will argue, today I will argue that if you take the Book of Mormon as seriously as you take the Bible, a profound mystery emerges. Not only does the book have a demonstrable positive effect on people, it almost certainly did not come from Joseph Smith when you look at the evidence that most people are not even aware of. Things like 1, archaeological evidence, 2, literary evidence, 3, historical evidence, 4, eyewitness testimony, and 5, the positive effect that the book has on people. If Trent wants to say it's reasonable for a person to believe in the Bible, I will say that this evidence makes it reasonable to believe in the divine inspiration behind the Book of Mormon. So let's start with archaeology. The Book of Mormon begins by describing Lehi's family's journey and claims that they come to a place in southwest Arabia that was called Nahom. There they buried Ishmael there, and they said that the trail turned east. And it just so happens that in the 1990s, the German Archaeological Institute discovered a place called Nahom in southwest Arabia, right where the ancient frankincense trail turns east. It also was a place of burials, and astoundingly, it even had a grave with the name Ishmael on it that dated to the 6th century BC. A lucky guess? Well, maybe. But it gets even crazier because the Book of Mormon says that due east of Nahom is a coastal land that Lehi called bountiful because of its green landscapes, fruit trees, running water, iron ore, wild honey, and in total, more than a dozen specific features totally out of place for the deserts of Arabia. And guess what you find when you go to the coast directly east of Nahom? You find the strange Dhofar region of Oman. It's an unusual 20-mile stretch of lush coastline which contains every one of the dozen specific features described in the Book of Mormon. It's an astounding bullseye. Now, I could go on and talk about the discovery of the Valley of Lemuel and other evidences from archaeology, but let's go on to number 2, the literary evidence. So Trent's theory is that a 23-year-old farm laborer with a 3rd grade education was not only able to come up with real undiscovered locations in the Near East, but that he was also able to write a 500-page book in a little over 2 months in a single draft. How remarkable is this? Well, have you ever written an 8-page, single-spaced essay in a single draft? Try doing that every single day for the next 3 months. Studies show that genius authors like J.K. Rowling and Stephen King produce about 200 to 400 words a day. Joseph was able to produce an astounding 4,000 words per day. And in a single draft, he produced one of the most influential religious texts of all time. This complex book includes multiple overlapping narratives, multiple writing styles, complex theology, psalms, chiastic poetry, authentic ancient Hebrew legal forms, and much, much more. Even non-Mormon Pulitzer Prize winner Daniel Walker Howe said that what Joseph produced should, quote, rank among the greatest works of American literature. And the atheist literary critic Harold Bloom, after studying Smith, called him a religious genius. So if Trent wants to say that Joseph was just some genius storyteller that was making things up, he's also going to need to explain away the authentic historical aspects of the book. For instance, here are some funny sounding names in the Book of Mormon. Himni, Luram, Mathoni, Aha, Amonihah, Chemish, Hagoth, Molokai, Abish, Mathoniah. Now, pretty much everyone thought that those were just made-up names, until during the past 80 years, archaeologists have discovered every single one of them in various ancient Hebrew texts. Trent is going to need to explain how Joseph, during his stream of consciousness dictation process, was able to make up over a dozen undiscovered ancient Hebrew names. Now, moving on, the Catholic Answers website says that chiasmus is an ancient Hebrew literary form that lists items in one order and then poetically repeats them back in reverse order. For example, he that finds his life shall lose it, and he that loses his life shall find it is a simple two-item chiasm. Now, remarkably, in 1967, textual scholars discovered dozens of complex chiasms in the Book of Mormon, including one in Alma 36, spanning 30 verses, with an astounding 17 items given in one order and then back again in reverse order, interwoven into a poetic sermon on Christ's redemptive power. The scholar John Welch calls it one of the finest examples of chiastic composition anywhere in world literature. Also, Trent needs to explain why the Book of Mormon makes so many authentic Hebrew wordplays. For example, Jershon in Hebrew is associated with the idea of an inheritance. And it just so happens that Jershon is the name given to the, quote, land of inheritance for the refugee people of Ammon. Also, it should be noted that the Book of Mormon contains 337 proper names, yet none of them have the letter Q, X, or W in them. Now, that may seem like an odd pattern until you realize that ancient Hebrew did not have the letter Q, W, or X. Also, what are the chances that King Zedekiah had a son named Mulek, as the Book of Mormon predicts? Well, he did, but we didn't know that until the 20th century. And I could go on, but let's go on to number 4, eyewitness testimony. Did you know that we have over 150 statements from a total of 19 different eyewitnesses who, despite facing extermination orders, mob violence, and 2 of them being murdered, went to their deaths saying that they saw the gold plates? Can you imagine how excited Trent would be if we discovered over 150 accounts from 19 separate eyewitnesses of the resurrection? Here are just 2 of these accounts. Someone once claimed that Martin Harris, one of the witnesses, had hallucinated and only saw the plates in a vision. Here was his response, quote, "Gentlemen, do you see this hand? Are you sure that you see it? Are your eyes playing a trick or something? No. Well, as sure as you see my hand, so sure did I see the plates." Trent has also implied in his book on Mormonism that they were liars and they were part of a 19-person conspiracy to join Smith for personal gain. But this conspiracy theory makes no sense when you learn that many of these eyewitnesses eventually left the church or were excommunicated, but still refused to deny their testimony despite immense pressure to do so. Look up the history. Over and over, when these witnesses had everything to gain by denying their testimony, they would not do it. Another one of the witnesses to the gold plates was named Oliver Cowdery. He said the following on his deathbed to his friend. He said, "Jacob, I want you to remember what I say to you. I'm a dying man, and what would it profit me to tell you a lie? I know that whereof I testified is true. It was no dream, no vain imagination of the mind. It was real." But how can you tell if this book was divinely inspired and not demonically inspired? Well, our Lord Jesus Christ answered this. He said that future prophets would come and, quote, "by their fruits ye shall know them." So imagine there was a book out there that consistently caused people to become more giving, more loving, more faithful, and more Christ-like. Would it be crazy to think that such a book was in some way divinely inspired? Well, that book exists, and it's called the Book of Mormon. The published academic literature is remarkable. Latter-day Saints give an astonishing 7 times more volunteer work to their community than your average American. Latter-day Saints financially give 4 to 6 times more to nonprofits than your average American, and that's more than any other major religious group in the country. Latter-day Saint temple marriages are 3 to 5 times less likely to end in divorce, and those stable marriages produce more children than any other major religious group. Also, in 2010, Pew Research found that people from these Latter-day Saint families knew more about the Bible than any other Christian group that they studied. And just to top that off, Latter-day Saints live an astounding 7 years longer and experience significantly better physical and mental health than your average American. So it should not surprise us that despite the continuous mockery of our beliefs, even by other Christians, studies on happiness find over and over that Latter-day Saints report the highest levels of life satisfaction. Now, we are not a perfect people, okay? We have our issues. But Trent is going to have to explain how an evil con man produced a book that leads people to be so consistently healthy, happy, and charitable. Keep in mind, Christ himself said that an evil tree does not bring forth good fruit. So why is it that Latter-day Saints are demonstrably such a benefit to the communities that they reside in? This is not a mystery for me. I have experienced the real power that comes from words like these in the Book of Mormon. Quote, "And we talk of Christ, we rejoice in Christ, we preach of Christ, and we prophesy of Christ that our children may know to what source they may look for a remission of their sins. And now seeing that ye know the light by which ye may judge, which is the light of Christ, I beseech you that ye should search diligently in the light of Christ. And if ye will lay hold upon every good thing and condemn it not, ye certainly will be a child of Christ." It's hard to believe that our friend here, Matt Fradd, has actually said that Catholics should burn those words because he believes that the Book of Mormon is demonic. But if you actually read the book, you will find the Book of Mormon explicitly puts Jesus Christ at its center, and that is why along with the Bible, it is the power to change people, including me. And that is why, despite derision and mockery, I am here to proclaim the Book of Mormon is another divinely inspired testament of Jesus Christ. So here's what I want Trent to do. I want him to stick his head in a hat, and I want him to dictate 8 single-space pages every day for the next 2.5 months and create a poetic and theological work with multiple narrators that predicts specific undiscovered locations in the Near East and that correctly predicts dozens of elements specific to those locations. He will also need to come up with over a dozen undiscovered names in the ancient Near East and dictate over a dozen poetic chiasms, including one on human redemption, with 17 elements given in one order and then repeated back in reverse order, all with his face buried in a hat. Also, he'll need to create multiple authentic Hebrew wordplays, predict the undiscovered name of an ancient Israelite prince, and create 300 names with plausible Hebrew origins without using the letters W, Q, or X. He must do this stream of consciousness dictation in the presence of multiple witnesses, and he must do it in a single draft. And what he produces must be called genius by atheist literary critics 150 years from now. Then he must convince 19 people so powerfully that they saw gold plates that they don't deny their testimonies even on their deathbeds or even after he excommunicates them from his church. I posit that it is unreasonable to think that Trent could do all of these things, and so it is unreasonable to think that Joseph could. Now, Trent and I both agree it is reasonable to believe that the Bible is inspired. But despite the archaeological, literary, historical, eyewitness, and spiritual evidence, Trent will reject the inspiration behind the Book of Mormon, and this will clearly expose Trent's double standard. Trent will argue like an atheist today. Just watch. Essentially, all of the arguments that Trent makes against the Book of Mormon are the same arguments that atheists can make against the Bible or the Catholic Church. For example, he'll say that the Book of Mormon is not inspired because he thinks that there's not enough archaeological evidence. But will Trent apply that same standard to the Book of Exodus? Or the many other biblical books that lack essentially any archaeological evidence for the events that they describe? He'll talk about anachronisms in the Book of Mormon, but he'll ignore biblical anachronisms, like iron tools being made by Tubal-Cain 1,000 or more years before the Iron Age. So watch carefully. Will Trent deal with the evidence that I've presented, or will he argue like an atheist?
Okay, good. All right, so we are going into a time of cross-examination. You tell me what y'all think. Here's what I like to think with cross-examine. Like, So you're going to take the first 15 minutes. That means you are free to ask him questions, to direct the conversation wherever you want it to go, to even interrupt him if he's filibustering or being boring. And that's not being rude. That's just part of the cross-examination, right? And then the same thing will happen for you. You're welcome to interrupt him, to interject, to lead the conversation wherever. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
That's good. I know these are usually the most exciting parts of the debates, but I think it's really great that both of you had some time to lay out your main arguments. So, whenever you want, Jacob, 15 minutes.
Okay, let's get started. So Trent, why does the Book of Mormon, published in 1830, correctly predict that King Zedekiah had a son named Mulek, if we didn't know that until the 20th century?
What people have discovered is that he had a son, his name was Mulekayu. It's not exactly Mulek. So there's a lot of things happen there where the Book of Mormon will create names, usually portmanteaus, like combinations of ancient names, for example, and they tend to line up with that. I'm sure you could probably do something.
Do you know the shortened version of that name is Mulek?
Possible, yeah.
Okay. So next, why does the Book of Mormon have over a dozen authentic Hebrew names that were not discovered until long after Joseph Smith's death?
Well, Joseph Smith did have access to things like Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews. There was also...
What's your source on that?
That's what scholars recognize. That was something that had already been translated. That
do you have any evidence that Joseph actually had that book?
I don't need to have access I don't need to have evidence that he possessed it, but if it's something that he could access within his own New York library, or for example, things like the Book of Enoch, were all in 1825 in New York.
Okay, that's a separate subject.
No, but it's extra
that wasn't the question I asked. Okay,
it's pseudographical Jewish literature that has names in it that was available in the time and place.
And you have no evidence that Joseph had any of that, right?
He lived in a context where it's available.
Okay, all right.
And if you throw
do you concede the existence of chiasmus literary form in the Book of Mormon?
The chiasm is something that appears in all kinds of literature.
Really, 17 item chiasms, regularly appear?
You were talking about the chiasm in Alma 36.
Alma 36, yeah.
Alma 36. And as I quoted other scholars like Earl Wonderly, who are skeptical that it is a chiastic structure, that you only get that by cherry picking the data.
It kind of sounds. Do you think you might have a bias against Mormonism?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it's actually published in Dialogue, the Journal of Mormon Thought.
Why does the Book of Mormon correctly predict over a dozen specific characteristics of a 20-mile stretch of coastline in the Dhofar region of Oman?
Because even if I couldn't answer that question, that wouldn't prove that the book is divinely inspired. But just predicting things like roads go east or west, or that they'll have certain things that are similar to other elements in the desert or in the Old Testament, that's not very impressive.
Do you believe that the devil is pleased when people read the Book of Mormon?
Do I believe the devil is pleased when they read it? I don't know. If someone reads it and comes to see that it's meandering, that it's false. Like, I'm not afraid of people choosing.
Let me quote a verse from it.
Would you like me to finish my answer?
Well, I think it's kind of filibustering. I'm just going to read a verse from the Book of Mormon.
It was about 8 seconds, but all right.
This is from the Moroni 7. It says, "That which is evil cometh of the devil, for the devil is an enemy unto God, and inviteth and enticeth to sin, and to do that which is evil. But behold, everything which inviteth and enticeth to do good, and to love God, and to serve him, is inspired of God. Wherefore I show unto you the way to judge, for everything which persuadeth to believe in Christ is sent forth by the gift and power of Christ." Does leading people towards Christ in order to serve God sound like the kind of thing that the devil wants people to do?
I could say the same thing about the Whitmerites, the Shakers, all other kinds of 19th century restorationist cults that make very similar claims to Mormons, but Mormons reject, that also try to lead people to Christ. So if it works for the Whitmerites and the Shakers, it doesn't work for the Book of Mormon.
Is the devil the one that's causing Latter-day Saint temple marriages to be 3 to 5 times less likely to end in divorce?
No, it could just be basic elements of natural law that if you have very strong core values, your marriages tend to last long. Many arranged marriages and non-Christian...
And do Latter-day Saints...
Can I finish
Do
my
they
thought,
get their
please?
values from the Book of Mormon?
Do they get their... I'm sure that some of them do. But as I said, in non-Christian parts of the world, arranged marriages last very long. But that doesn't prove those Buddhist or Hindu cultures are true in their religious beliefs.
Okay. Is it the devil that's causing Latter-day Saints to give 7 times more volunteer service than your average American?
No, it's just a wonderful, robust tithing program. So I am envious of that. That you've got, which Bible itself doesn't command tithing, though.
Okay. Is it the devil that's causing Latter-day Saints to know their Bibles better than almost better than every other major Christian group in the United States?
I'm sure they know it well. I know Jehovah's Witnesses that also know the Bible backwards and forward. But as St. Jerome said, it's not the letter of Scripture that matters, but its meaning. That's where Mormons fall flat.
Got it. Why is it reasonable to believe that the book of Exodus is inspired of God?
Because Jesus thought that it was, and his church says that it is.
Okay. So what is you have said that the most important evidence for the resurrection would be the claims that Jesus appeared in bodily form to groups of his disciples. So the most important evidence for the resurrection, and therefore Christianity and the Catholic Church, is the witness testimony of Jesus Christ's resurrection. Is that correct?
Correct. Not all witness testimony is equal, though.
Okay. How many specific eyewitnesses left extant written accounts of the resurrection?
We would say that you mean first-person accounts of it?
Yeah, it's eyewitnesses who left extant written first-hand accounts of the resurrection.
Well, of the moment of the resurrection or the post-resurrection appearances?
The moment of the resurrection.
The moment of the resurrection happened in the tomb and nobody was around, but that's inferred by seeing Christ's post-resurrected
Let's include the post-resurrection.
Okay.
How many written extant accounts do we have?
From an eyewitness?
Yes.
Well, if you believe that it was John the Apostle, that would be one.
Did the majority of scholars conclude the Gospel of John was written by John?
Scholars don't, no. But the most important ones we have Paul's letter to the Corinthians that records the appearances, and Paul had firsthand contact with those who had those appearances. Correct? No, he doesn't call it a vision.
Oh, so it isn't a visionary experience. He said he wasn't sure if he was in the body or out of the body.
He's talking about his appearance in the heavens, and he specifically says there, I do not know if it was in the body or out of the body, but he uses a Greek word, orao, that just means appeared, to see. And he says in 1 Corinthians, have I not seen the Lord? He speaks about it in a normal way, which is very different from the Book of Mormon witnesses that repeatedly say they saw it in a vision or a trance and say things like that.
So how many total people left first-hand eyewitness accounts of the resurrection? Can you give me a number? I just want a number.
That they saw the resurrected Jesus.
Is it more than 3?
I wouldn't say that. It's probably not more than 3. But I would rather have reliable second-hand accounts in the New Testament than the unreliable ones for the Book of Mormon.
So you have 3 maybe accounts, but how many people left first-hand accounts of the gold plates? Like, give me a number.
Like left first-hand accounts?
Yeah. How many people left first-hand accounts that they had seen the gold plates?
That they had seen the plates?
Yes.
I don't know, there could be about a dozen people who said they saw something like this, but that doesn't mean that it's a divinely inspired artifact. Okay. Now, when it comes to the witnesses, the 3 witnesses and the 8 witnesses, technically we only have signatures to statements, all of which were written by Oliver Cowdery.
Okay, so
none of the men actually signed it themselves.
But here's the thing: that was just Cowdery. They all testified later in their life that they had seen the gold plates. Outside of what Cowdery wrote. Cowdery was just providing the printer's manuscript to actually publish it. So that's just a bad argument. The other thing, here's the thing though. You have, here's a first-hand eyewitness statement from David Whitmer shortly before his death in 1887. He said, quote, I wish now, standing as it were in the very sunset of life and in the fear of God, for once and all to make this public statement, that I have never in any time denied my testimony or any part thereof, which has so long been published in the Book of Mormon. I also testify to the world that neither Oliver Cowdery nor Martin Harris at ever time denied their testimony. They both died reaffirming the truth of the divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon. Oliver's last words to me were, quote, Brother David, be true to your testimony of the Book of Mormon. Okay? Now, do you have any extant, first-hand, signed statements like this for the resurrection? Yes or no?
No, we don't have that.
Okay. Why would David Whitmer make a statement like that after leaving the church and believing that Joseph Smith was a false prophet?
He made that statement because he had given a previous interview where he said, as I quoted, where he said that the angel, he did not see the appearance or shape of the angel, he felt an impression. And then when that caused an outcry, he clarified that. But what's interesting
what's the source of that quote that you just gave?
He was giving an interview with, here, I can bring it up here if you like. Let's see. But I do know he also said in his own word, address in his own
Would you admit there's a lot of-
address to all Christians, he said that God spoke to me again by his own voice and told me to separate myself from the Latter-day Saints.
So it's true that David Whitmer did have a falling out with Joseph Smith over the failure of a financial failure that happened, and he felt that Joseph should have known better, but he never denied his testimony in the Book of Mormon.
It was an interview with John Murphy, dated in 1880, when Whitmer said that. And then later he clarified it.
So, John, did you know that the statement I just read was in response to what Murphy had claimed that he had said? He said that David Whitmer actually came out and said, Murphy is lying. I didn't say that.
No, he said that he never denied. He said that
You're
he
just
never.
unfamiliar
No,
with it.
he said that he never denied his testimony, but his testimony is that he felt an impression of the angel, not that he beheld it. He never denied that part. He just said, "I never denied my testimony."
Here's a quote
but
from
Mormon testimonies
what do you think
conflate
of,
the
I wanna ask you
natural
what you think of
and
this.
spiritual eye.
So David Whitmer said this. Someone accused him of being hallucinating. He said, "No, sir, I was not under any hallucination, nor was I deceived. I saw with these eyes, I heard with these ears. I know of which I speak. Everything was as natural to us as it is at any time." In other words, it's simply you're relying on sources. I want everyone to know this. He's relying on sources that are enemies of the church that wanted to try and make it seemed like they had contradicted their testimony. Now, to go on, do you think it's plausible that Joseph Smith did indeed have plates of some kind, some sort of a metal object?
Yeah, similar to how the Kinderhook plates existed.
So you think it's plausible?
Can I finish? Well, similar to how the Kinderhook plates existed and those were a hoax, or James Strang had the Voree plates. He could have had plates like that.
Okay, so first of all, Joseph, all of those things are hearsay accounts of what people said that Joseph said. Okay, you have no statement from Joseph Smith saying that he had confirmed that any of those things were ever legitimate.
It was his own scribe who said that he invested. William Clayton, it was his own scribe who said that he saw that.
Someone said that he said. These are secondhand accounts. Now, you said that you think it's plausible that he did. My question is, why is it more likely than not? That's what plausible means. Why is it more likely than not that Joseph had those plates?
First, let me be clear. Those plates existed. You're referencing whether Joseph Smith attempted to translate the Kinderhook plates. Your original question was, do I think that there were plates? There certainly could have been, just like there were the Kinderhook plates and the Voree plates. No, I'm asking if
it's plausible. Do you think it's plausible, more likely than not, that Joseph had metal plates of some kind?
I think it's plausible he had some kind of an object.
Why?
People often testified there were people said they saw an object.
So the
with
witnesses,
cloth over.
you think that the witnesses are reliable to say that it is reliable that he had something. You just deny that what he had actually contained the plates.
No, I deny that what he had were 550 pages worth of information transcribed onto 40 golden plates in a language called Reformed Egyptian that never existed in the history of the world.
So you don't have there were never any statements of exactly how many plates that there were. And also, if you're going to say that he forged metal plates, do you have any evidence that he forged metal plates? Is there anything in the historical record showing that he actually had the ability to do that, the resources, any of it?
No, but that's not my job to prove whether he did or didn't do that. The fact is there are many different hypotheses. And so if we have one hypothesis that God preserved plates that actually have information that couldn't have been contained on them in a language that didn't exist, or there were artifacts similar to other fake metal artifacts that did exist at the time, that seems more likely to me.
Okay, so why did Oliver Cowdery say the following on his deathbed? It was no dream, no vain imagination of the mind, it was real.
Because the early Mormons at that time, you could read Michael Quinn's book, Mormonism and the Magical Worldview. What they say is whether something is real is something where the natural eye and the spiritual eye come together. So, for example, in the testimony of the three witnesses, it says that they saw the plates by the power of God, which is weird because I can see. Let me finish. I can see these without the power of God. That makes me seem like it's something a bit more visionary.
Did the 8 witnesses say that they saw it by the power of God?
I'd have to go back to their testimony of it.
Okay, John Whitmer was one of the 8 witnesses, and before his death, he was asked the following question about the rumor that they had only seen it under a cloth or in a vision. A newspaper article asked John Whitmer directly. He said, quote, he asked him, did you see it under the plates? And John said, quote, no, Joseph handed them uncovered into our hands, and we turned the leaves sufficient to satisfy us. Why should we believe you over the actual witnesses?
You wouldn't have to disbelieve me. There could be plates like Kinderhook or Voree that you turn and you look at, but they're not actually ancient plates.
But you have no evidence of Joseph committing metallurgical fraud.
No, I don't need that because there were other people committing metallurgical fraud. And just like you have no evidence that they contain a reformed Egyptian writing or had any of these documents on them, it could have been someone else, or he could have done that through someone else. I don't have to provide a complete alternative account. All I have to say is that this miraculous account is severely lacking in evidence and contradicting
evidence. Did they risk
evidence.
their lives to keep those testimonies, to say those things?
Who, Joseph Smith?
Those witnesses.
Well, I know that Joseph Smith was certainly risking his life because the Illinois authorities were certainly...
What about the extermination order on Mormons in Missouri?
Can I finish? Well, here's the issue. Many religious people risk their lives living out their faith. So we're talking about the original witnesses here. And whether someone risks their life shows evidence of their sincerity or at least their commitment.
All right. So, Jacob, whenever you want to begin, since you started,
okay.
Trent gets the last word. So whenever you want to begin.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you guys both for this. This has actually been a real pleasure. I've very much enjoyed it. But for every Christian, the central claim is that around 2,000 years ago, a real historical person named Jesus of Nazareth rose from the dead. So every Christian must ask themselves why it's reasonable to believe this. Trent answered this in a recent video and here today when he said that it is the eyewitnesses that are the primary reason and they're the grounds for Trent's belief, not only in the Bible, but in Christianity, Catholicism, and the whole thing. They reduce down to that ultimately. Just think about it. If the resurrection didn't happen, is it reasonable to be a Christian? The Bible provides us with at most 2 eyewitness accounts of the resurrection and 1 account from Paul, who claimed to see Jesus in a vision. And with that as his central basis, Trent concludes it's reasonable to believe that the Bible is inspired. And frankly, I actually agree with Trent. I believe that it is reasonable to believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. But let's compare that with the Book of Mormon. There are well over 100 accounts from 19 separate eyewitnesses to the Book of Mormon plates who all went to their deathbeds testifying that they saw the plates despite facing a literal extermination order in Missouri and rampant mob violence. Even when some of them were excommunicated by Joseph, they refused to deny what they had seen and experienced. And what Trent has presented today is essentially the secondhand gossip around it. On top of this evidence, we have the archaeological evidence, historical evidence, literary evidence, and the demonstrable spiritual or positive spiritual effect that this book has on its readers. So if someone wants to say that it's reasonable to believe in the Bible because of its eyewitness accounts, to be consistent, they're going to have to explain away not only all of the eyewitnesses to the Book of Mormon, but also all of the other evidence, and Trent has failed to do that today. What we have seen instead is a clear double standard, because essentially every argument Trent has made against the Book of Mormon is an argument that can also be made against the Bible. So if you're going to believe in a book with talking donkeys, global floods, and Egyptian armies being swallowed up by the sea, I would be careful about asserting that a belief in the Book of Mormon is somehow out of bounds for a reasonable person. My goal today has simply been this: to show people that they're laughing off the Book of Mormon as a joke is no different than atheists who laugh off the Bible. Laughing off a book that has produced a people like the Latter-day Saints seems strange to me. In today's messed up world, when you find a group of people who through their professed faith in Jesus Christ are so consistently producing stable, loving families, high levels of service and charity, and have high levels of life satisfaction, perhaps it's time to, at the very least, take them seriously. Stephen Webb, the Catholic theologian and philosopher, said, quote, "Mormonism is obsessed with Christ, and everything it teaches is meant to awaken, encourage, and expand faith in him. I came to this conclusion when I read through the Book of Mormon for the first time." So why not be curious about us? We don't bite. Why not get to know us? I've heard that we're nice people. Why not read this book in a serious way before you mock it? There are millions of people whose lives have been made better by this book, including mine. And for those of you feeling spiritually unsatisfied and looking for hope in today's darkening world, please consider where the Book of Mormon says that you can find it. "Behold, ye shall have hope through the atonement of Christ and the power of his resurrection. And this because of your faith. Wherefore, whoso believeth in God might with a surety hope for a better world, yea, even a place at the right hand of God, which hope cometh of faith, maketh an anchor to the souls of men, which would make them sure and steadfast, always abounding in good works, being led to glorify God. It is my personal witness to you that these words are inspired of God, and that if you open your heart, God will reveal that to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button so my future videos show up on your feed. Also, if you or someone that you know has benefited from the content here on Thoughtful Faith, please consider becoming a channel donor or volunteer by visiting my new website, thoughtfulfaith.org, and clicking on the Get Involved page.